A very good afternoon to everyone. I would like to first thank AGES Nigeria chapter for having given me this opportunity to share my work on the endometrium. And the topic for today is the sick endometrium. Endometrium is a constantly changing part of the uterus from the menstrual phase to the proliferative phase to ovulatory phase, secretory phase. So it's in a constant change. Along with that, you have with the aging, you have the atrophic endometrium coming up, and then of the pathologies of the endometrium, the chronic endometritis, which is tubercular, the non-tubercular. I will be covering all of that. Thank you once again, Aegis, for having given me this opportunity. So, what you are seeing here is a normal hysteroscopy. The endometrium is in the proliferative phase and the tubal ostia are seen. The catch in a good hysteroscopy is always good visualization, and good visualization is because of good distension and the right kind of intrauterine pressure. There are basically three landmarks to good hysteroscopy, both the tubal ostia and the endocervix. And it becomes a very important part to actually go closer to the tubal ostia at the cornu and look at the tubal ostia. The images that you're going to be seeing in my presentation from here on have been taken by 3 mm, 5 mm telescope, 6.5 mm, and also the resectoscope. Coming to the cervical canal, the hysteroscopy aspects of a normal cervical canal are papillary structures are noticeable in the first 2 centimeters above the external os. Glandular crypts are situated between the papillae. Arbor vitae, these are the lateral columns, and cervical polyps, adhesions, atresia, cysts, they are all pathologies which are actually clearly diagnosed with hysteroscopy. These are endocervical mucus strands, so you can actually see the mucus strand coming out of the gland. This is Nabothian cyst on one side, and the other one is the endocervical cyst. Microcolpo hysteroscopy with Hemo microcolpo hysteroscope 2. So this is a very interesting instrument which actually allows you to go up to 80x magnification in vivo. You are seeing here the part of the cervix, external cervix, ectocervix, and in the lower pictures you actually get to see the honeycomb appearance of the columnar cells on one side, and on the other side you are seeing the squamous cells with the cytoplasmic nuclear ratios. So you actually get to see the cellular structure. We were published in the American Journal years back on this. This is one of our publications in JMAC on chronic cervicitis. When you go close to the cervix area which is inflamed, this is how it looks. This is early proliferative phase endometrium. You can see it's a smooth looking endometrium which is very evident as a character to itself. This is secretory phase, a fluffy kind of pinkish endometrium in the secretory phase. This is how the atrophic endometrium looks like, and in atrophic endometrium it's a stretched out endometrium. So closure visualization was done, and at source magnification what we saw was a crisscross interlacing myometrial fibers with overlying endometrium barely visible in form of ill-defined island patches. No endometrial gland openings were seen, and abundant capillary vascularization, the subpetechial hemorrhages, are often seen in atrophic endometrium. So these are images which are closer images to show you how atrophic endometrium looks like. I'm coming on to endometrial tuberculosis. So the pictures that you're going to see are confirmed by PCR and BACTEC culture. So there is no confusion as far as the diagnosis of tuberculosis is concerned. We do know that tuberculosis manifests as menstrual irregularities, lower abdominal pain, severe reproductive consequences on fertility in spontaneous as well as in IVF cycles. The hysteroscopic markers for endometrial tuberculosis basically are 4, and amongst them it is the bizarre endometrial architecture. There are tubercular deposits, microscopic to large macroscopic deposits are sometimes seen. ill-defined endometrial gland openings, and adhesions and synechia. I'm going to be taking you through the pictures of endometrial tuberculosis, images which we have taken on hysteroscopy. We were published in the Journal of the American Association with these two pictures. So the right ostium is seen in the center. A whitish tubercular deposit are present all around the ostium and involve the intramural part of the right tube. The endometrium is thin, dirty, pale looking, irregular, with no endometrial gland openings visible. A whitish tubercle is seen on the other side of the picture. So here is how bizarre endometrial architecture looks like. So if you would take your mind a bit back to proliferative phase or even secretory phase or atrophic phase, they had very distinct character to themselves. While in endometrial tuberculosis, it just loses its character. It becomes dirty, flimsy, friable, sprinkled with whitish powder, and in these images you can actually see those flimsy adhesions as well. These we were published with the cover page images on the surface architecture of the endometrium in tuberculosis. So what we actually saw at 40x magnification was the fact that the endometrium becomes nibbled up. It's almost like a mouse has nibbled up at the endometrium, and it is sprinkled. There is a sprinkle of white powderish substance on it when you go closer to the endometrium, which are actually the tubercles or deposits which are actually pathognomic of tuberculosis. So unusual appearing tubercular deposits at hysteroscopy, and what we found in these, sometimes these deposits actually on a vaginal ultrasound are highly reflective focal defects, and these were almost 2 mm each. So it's very significant even before you actually put your hysteroscope to have a good 2D 3D ultrasound done. Now we have very good ultrasounds available before you actually take up the patient for a hysteroscopic evaluation. This is a video showing you a deposit resting over the posterior uterine wall, and these are the patients where it is important and significant that the kind of flow rates when we start doing the hysteroscopic evaluation, they are low, because if we have more flow rates, these deposits actually wash off. In fact, these deposits wash off just when you put in the hysteroscope, and even on the menstrual cycle, often these get washed off with the menstruation. It is the basalis layer of the endometrium which is infected, and then they keep regrowing, the tubercles keep regrowing, and the infection keeps happening over and over again. So inside the same uterine cavity. So these are macroscopic deposits seen in panoramic view. These are deposits seen after increasing magnification. So in this picture, actually you can actually see even the adhesion bands, the flimsy adhesion bands, which actually need to be just snipped open with a scissors, and a normal cavity comes up. But at the same time, it's important to take the biopsy from around these areas. A tubercular deposit seen under high magnification. These are deposits in the endometrial tuberculosis. Again, these are the kind of deposits which are often picked up on a good ultrasound diagnosis. Large tubercle seen in endometrial tuberculosis. In these pictures, actually, you can even see the flimsy adhesion bands and the deposit inside them. On laparoscopy, this is how the image looks like of the deposits. This is a scarred endocervical canal. Again, adhesions which are pathognomic of tuberculosis in the endocervical canal, and sometimes, if there are flimsy adhesions just with the distension, while you're distending with the fluid, they kind of open up. You may not have to use actually the scissors. Adhesions in endometrial tuberculosis, again, these are different kind of adhesions that you're going to see. So this is a video showing you the adhesions in tuberculosis. Often we find grade 4, grade 3 adhesions, and in these kind of tubercular adhesions and tuberculosis of longer duration, we find that the cavity has become very tubular. It becomes almost like a T-shaped cavity. The idea always is to open up the cavity into an inverted triangle, achieve the anatomical landmarks. You are seeing the Collins knife being used here, and with the Collins knife we are trying to cut open the adhesion band, and what we have seen is we have reached the tubal ostia in this. And the first part, of course, always is try to use do the adhesiolysis without any energy source, mechanically, either with the scissors, or even if you are using the Collins knife as we had to, you actually try to use no energy source. Now we have had to use the energy source simply because of the fact that it was a very thick adhesion band. We were not able to see the tubal ostia on the other side, so we've just tried to, kind of make the cavity spacious enough on an inverted triangle shape. The idea always is to restore the uterine cavity to its normal shape, although these kind of patients really don't have very great pregnancy outcomes. Again, when we are doing this surgery, what can happen sometime is a false passage which can get created during hysteroscopy. So we were published again with a cover page image on the false passage. What is important in recognition of a false passage is that you are in a kind of a tubular circular muscle fiber. So you're going to see the circular muscle fibers, you're not going to see the tubal ostia, you're not going to see the anatomical landmarks, and this is what should actually put your mind straight away that you have created a false passage, and that is a possibility in patients of adhesiolysis or genital tuberculosis. We were published with the images of the Cornwall adhesions in the Indian Journal. So these are deposits impregnated over flimsy adhesion bands. You can see these little adhesions and you can see these deposits which are there. These are actually tubercles. So sometimes it's a very good idea to take biopsies around these areas. These are this is the cornules of different patients, and it's a spidery cobweb-like adhesion bands you get, and they are sprinkled with deposits or tubercles. We were published in Fertility Sterility with our image on intraluminal tubal adhesions, again a part of endometrial tuberculosis. So in this slide, I find this a very significant slide talking about the normal endosteum between and the diseased ostium. So in a normal ostium, the intramural epithelium is pink. Minor folds have smooth surface. Normal vascularization of the minor folds along the long axis of the folds. Collateral vessels are seen, and physiological contractions are seen during hysteroscopy. The important part to understand is that the tubal ostia at lower intrauterine pressures is actually going to show up like a mouth of a fish. It's going to be moving with the physiological contractions. So that actually gives you the idea that it's a good ostia. While a diseased ostium, the intramural epithelium is dirty, minor folds have rough surface with eroded margins, no vascularization is seen, no collateral vessels are seen, and there are no physiological contractions. It's a morbid round kind of a ostia. These are tubal adhesions, so you actually can see in all of these pictures that the ostia is morbid and round, and in the intramural part you can see the adhesions. This is an uncommon presentation of a tubal polyp, and I put this picture up here because in our studies what we found was that there were more tubal polyps in and around the tubal ostia in endometrial tuberculosis. Of course, this is the previous one was sessile. This is a pedunculated polyp, and this is how they look. More studies are needed in order to the challenges, the association and the correlation of tubal polyps with genital tuberculosis. We do know that even in chronic endometritis, which is of non-tubercular origin, there is an association of micropolyps, which I will be taking forward and showing you images of those as well. So we started to do relook hysteroscopy after antitubercular therapy, one of our publications in Fertility Sterility. This is the images. Actually, this slide is very interesting because it has images of the same patient before antitubercular therapy and after antitubercular therapy when we did a relook after 6 months. So you have the endocervical canal, and in the endocervical canal you can see that it's got scar tissue, while later on when we put the hysteroscope after 6 months of ATT, the endometrium is pink, it's healthy looking, it's smooth, it's kind of got its character to itself. itself. Similarly, the right cornu had a lot of pale looking, dirty looking endometrium, while it is more, it's got the gland openings which are seen at the right cornu. It's smoother, and the right anterolateral wall as well. Another interesting thing which he started to do was put in the hysteroscope after doing a CPT, where in cases where we had done hysteroscopy with laparoscopy. The methylene blue dye actually stained the endometrium on the back side. It made it like kind of blue, and in that blueness of the endometrium, the tubercles started to stand out against the blue. So we started calling it the starry night appearance in tuberculosis. The tubercles, white tubercles, stand out against the blue endometrium in methylene blue, with methylene blue dye. So these are deposits impregnated over flimsy adhesion bands, cobweb-like adhesions. This is one of our publications, endometrial tuberculosis in a unicornuate uterus with a rudimentary horn. This is endometrial tuberculosis abscess. So you see that these abscesses, sometimes when you put in the hysteroscope, they are strewn all over the endometrium. Sometimes in very frank cases, we have also experienced that there's a very cotton wool like fluffy tubercles all over inside the uterine cavity. So once you see these are almost pathognomic of tuberculosis, and it's very significant to send them for a PCR and a BACTEC culture, the biopsy. Coming to chronic endometritis, which is non-tubercular. So chronic endometritis is a subtle condition that may cause abnormal uterine bleeding and infertility. Clinically, chronic endometritis in most cases is asymptomatic, or it is accompanied by mild disturbances like spotting, mild undefined pelvic pain, and leukorrhea. Chronic endometritis will have consequences on IVF cycles as well. The histological confirmation of the disease is usually based on superficial stromal edema, increased stromal density, pleomorphic infiltrate, and which is dominated by lymphocytes and plasma cells. Plasma cells remain to be pathognomic of chronic endometritis. So where we are suspecting chronic endometritis, our biopsy, we must look for plasma cells. The chronic endometritis induces specific changes at glandular, stromal, and vascular level, and these may be hysteroscopically investigated. Cicinelli et al. Have done a lot of work. We have been published with chronic endometritis as well. How does it affect infertility? So it creates an altered leukocyte population and consequently an aberrant endometrial microenvironment. The uterine dysperistalsis induced by chronic endometritis may be an important cause of infertility. Coming to the markers, hysteroscopic markers in chronic endometritis, we were published with JMIC with the markers. So basically there are 4 markers, and amongst the 4 markers, we have the first one being the strawberry appearance, which is prominent white glandular orifices surrounded by hyperemia. Such lesions are localized or scattered throughout the cavity. There is stromal edema. There is endometrial thickening, which may be homogeneous or non-homogeneous, caused by stromal edema, and there are micropolyps less than 1 millimeter in size. Coming to images, how they look. So this is how prominent glands look like, and these have been images have been taken only by histologically confirmed cases of chronic endometritis. You can actually see the punctate white spots that you're seeing. They're surrounded by a red hyperemia. It's an angry looking endometrium, and this is one of the pathognomic appearances of what is called as the strawberry-like appearance of the endometrium. In this picture, apparently around the tubulostia, it's not as bad, but if you take the picture to the other side, you are seeing a patchy endometrium which has got its redness. It's angry looking. These are the gland openings surrounded by a red halo, the hyperemia, which is again one of the features, the strawberry-like appearance. It looks like the outside of the strawberry. And the lower picture, if you will notice, it's the white spot that you're seeing is the gland opening, and it is again surrounded by a red tissue. This is the inflammatory infiltrate. This is how it is looking like. So this is one of our publications in the American Journal of Obsgynaecology, where we actually saw a very angry looking inflammatory polyp, and in this polyp you can actually see the white punctate spots are the gland openings surrounded by the red angry looking hyperemia. So chronic endometritis can present in this kind of a way as well. This is how stromal edema looks like. This is undulating endometrium, it becomes thickened. Undulating endometrium. These are micropolyps, and these are at source magnification. So actually, and even it's not a magnified image. So what you're seeing here is the afferent and the efferent arterioles as well. All you need to do is go close to the endometrium, and when you will look at the endometrium, sometimes you will get to see these kind of clear pictures if you have a stable distension. This is how you can actually get to see the micropolyps. In this picture, we have put the loop purposefully for academic purposes, that the micropolyps are translucent to light. They have this infiltrate, so they are translucent to light, and this is how they look. This is one of different cases wherein all four features of chronic endometritis are visible. You have the micropolyps, you have the strawberry-like appearance, you have the stromal edema, and you have the undulating endometrium as well. These are micropolyps in bunches from the anterior wall. You can see how angry looking they are, and they are very small, tiny polyps, but this is a very beautiful picture which actually one of our patients had, and she was actually a sex worker, and she had a constant complaint of pain. When we put in the hysteroscope, this is exactly what we found. We were published with this patients as a case report in JMIG, and this is the posterior wall showing you the micropolyps again, angry looking micropolyps. I bring you to mirror lesion at hysteroscopy. We were on the cover page with these images. So what we found was very interesting. A polyp leaves a footprint on the posterior wall with a angry looking endometrium. In fact, Dr. Linda Bradley, she's the medical director of AAGL, she actually gave me the terminology of footprint. So really it is a footprint, and I think that is what the challenges are. We called it KISS hyperemia, but polyp, because of its compression posteriorly, the endometrium gets affected. So I believe, infertility has a lot more, we need to explore a lot more hysteroscopically. Even if you remove the polyp, this endometrium, how long it's going to take to recover and come into its normal character is something which needs to be evaluated, and I think more studies are required for the KISS hyperemia or the mirror lesions that we see in hysteroscopy. This is a video showing you the angry looking endometrium in chronic endometritis. Anytime you get to see a very red endometrium with gland openings, stromal edema, micropolyps, you must positively consider the diagnosis of chronic endometritis. This is how deep adenomyosis looks like. So in one of our patients, while we were doing resection, we saw these cavities. We got to these cavities which were lined by the endometrial tissue, and this is how deep adenomyosis inside it's deep inside the myometrium. Thank you very much for the presentation, for giving me this opportunity.